But the guys will hate me for saying this. I literally think it's just because she was a woman that killed a guy, and history
Became powerful.
and history has a tendency to be written from a male perspective, and therefore, what kind of a woman kills her husband? And I think that's all there is to it. There's no before, there's no after. It's literally that, and I think that kind of taints a lot of this era. You know,
Sure.
I really think there's, we've had the discussion multiple times. Who's actually responsible for writing some of his history, right?
For sure.
Who's making this guy the hero and making this guy the villain? You know what I mean?
And maybe we ought to revisit, because let's go back to the facts and forget all the digestion and people having told us that this person is supposed to be a hero and this person is not supposed to be a hero, and distill from the facts forward who actually was the hero and who was the guy that's not on Team Mujir and Tarek historically, right? She's the first Sultana in the history of Islam. And in many ways, because she was the mother of the Mamluk dynasty, as we'll get into, we'll explain exactly how that happens. She is in some ways a Khalifa, right? Because as you know, we've always been saying that the Mamluk were actually the true Khalifs because they defended the realm.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning to the Seasons of Time podcast. I'm your host, Tarek Ibrahim, and I'm here with Mujir Muneeruddin. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be a show, and I know we have this little bit of a banter every time, Mujir, but we're going to talk about an unsung female hero. Now, due to popular fiction, that's what we'll call it today, this hero is actually not really known as a hero. In Egyptian folklore, we'll call it that, considered a very horrible person. When I spoke to my dad about her, oh, she's the worst, she's so bad, she did this and she did that. And I want to get into the story with you guys, but because we're actually going to go into the story, I'm not going to give it all away. But we're talking today about none other than Shajar al Durr. And it is a very, very, very unique individual for so many reasons, right? Mujir, like, let's be honest here.
Yep.
A lot of firsts with this female.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, to me, I actually think she really is an unsung hero. Like, I'm actually very excited for today's episode because I've always felt that this woman is really, really miscategorized. And even if what she did is cataclysmic, even if what she did is savage, I still think part of the times, part of the reality of that period of life kind of makes it all okay.
Listen, that's a fair take, but I don't think you even have to go that far. I actually don't see what catastrophic thing that lady did that could even have her categorized in this way.
Oh, this is great.
And we're going to get into this, and I appreciate you giving that air cover, but honestly, it's not even necessary.
I love it. So, Mujir, to you, if we can go from a very, very conclusion, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the details, to you, who is Shajar al Durr?
Shajar al Durr is a pioneer. She's the first Sultana in the history of Islam. And in many ways, because she was the mother of the Mamluk dynasty, as we'll get into, we'll explain exactly how that happens. She is in some ways a Khalifa, right? Because as you know, we've always been saying that the Mamluk were actually the true Khalifs because they defended the realm, other than the fact that the Abbasis at the time were in this monopoly position where people felt that they just had to be the Khalifs, delegating authority to the actual sultans or the actual people that were ruling. And this fiction carried on from the Mamluk to the Ottomans for quite some time until Sultan Salim al-Awwal laid it to rest and fixed things up.
And if you want to check out our episodes where we go in depth with the Abbasids
and the Mamluks,
there's a whole thing there. So check out our videos. We'll try and put the link up here for you guys to actually follow along with it. But we go into these details. So if you're just tuning in,
and we're relevant, we are going to try and connect with other episodes we've done. We've done the Mamluks episode, which we definitely recommend people go back and watch. There's a one about Baybars that is going to be very interconnected with this one. But Baybars was told from a figure who was existing at the same time, but from his perspective. This one's going to be from Shajar al Durr's perspective, who is a contemporary and maybe even somebody closely connected to Baybars. But it's kind of like those movies like Crash, where they show the same thing from a different perspective. We're going to try and do that today and explain exactly how Baybars, as we've said, is the greatest of the Mamluk. This is the al-Mamluk. She's the mother and the founder of the Mamluk dynasty.
And I think one of my favorite parts, not to get into the exact details, I don't want to be a spoiler. I'm not trying to be, believe me. But I think the cool thing about this, and you already gave the introduction, right? But she is, in my humble opinion, the only female Khalifa, female Sultana. Like, never happened before, never happened after.
Yeah.
And ultimately responsible, as you would like to always use, saving the realm. Huge role in just really, whether it's the Crusades, whether it's the Mongols, she set up a hell of a plan. And we're going to get into that. We'll get into it, so don't feel bad. We'll get into it. But really, there's a lot of credit.
And I do want to cap it off with a discussion and maybe us getting into hypotheses as to why she got so shafted and shortchanged in history.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So stay till the end. Don't stop watching.
Yeah.
Stay all the way to the end, because Mujir and I are going to go back and forth on who this woman really is.
Yeah. So in the interest of everybody's time, let's jump right into it. Let's start with a bit of a biographical timeline type sketch, and then we can get into a discussion about who she was and what she did. So the story starts in about the 1210s, 1220s. You have this slave girl that is, in fact, we're not even really sure where she's from. The most likely, and when I say most likely, let's say it's a 45% probability based on what I've seen, is that she's an Armenian girl, somehow snapped up into slavery. Some people feel that she's Turkic because she's connected to the Mamluks, who were generally from the Turkic areas of Central Asia. But it seems like, I actually haven't seen anything that says that she was Turkic speaking. So I actually think she probably was Armenian, which is kind of cool, given the history and how that all played out.
The controversy keeps going.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so this lady somehow ends up in the harem of a prince by the name of Salih al-Ayyub, who later became known as Najmuddin. He was one of the strongest and the last strong ruler of the Ayyub dynasty of the 12th and the 13th century.
And if you guys haven't been able to figure out, that's the lineage of Salahuddin.
So he is the great nephew of Salahuddin.
That's right.
Okay. So since Salahuddin, rahimahullah, and Nasir, there's been a slew of very weak sultans, one of whom, Al-Kamil, who was Salih's father, actually at the Treaty of Jaffa has given control of Qutuz back to the Crusaders, because he is content in Egypt and he's like, these guys are going to keep coming for Jerusalem. Let them have it. As long as we can control and have rights to Masjid al-Aqsa, we're okay. And he sells out exactly what his ancestor, Salahuddin, and all his predecessors fought so hard for. It's really a ridiculous point in history. But at around 1239, the Muslims get it back. So that's a whole nother sidebar. We'd love to cover that in another
hell of a sidebar that you just dropped that in the middle of a Shajar al Durr episode. Sorry, guys, you're gonna have to wait on that one.
Exactly. So Shajar al Durr is now in the harem of Salih, let's say in the 1230s. Okay. So early on, he's a prince. He's considered to be very competent, very religious. He seemed to be very ambitious. So in many ways, a lot of his Ayyubid relatives see him as a second coming of Salahuddin, and they're kind of afraid of him because after Salahuddin, the Ayyubids are really fractionalized. They're very much divided into, you've got the Mesopotamian Ayyubids in Iraq, you've got the Shami Ayyubids in Syria and Damascus and Halab, and then you've got some in Anatolia, and then you've got the Ayyubids in Egypt. Okay, so Al-Kamil, who's the sellout that gave Jerusalem away to Frederick and the Crusaders, he dies around 1238, 1239, and almost immediately the Ayyubids go into a civil war. It fractionalizes. And I'm saying this as part of Shajar al Durr's story because you saw part of her history. And when you're talking about a person as unique as Shajar al Durr, you really want to explain the context that gave rise to such a unique thing even happening. How does a slave girl who's not even Arabic speaking become the Sultana of Egypt? There's these really crazy circumstances that lead to it. So she's described as beautiful, very intelligent, very polished. So when she's in the Ayyubid courtly culture, she fits right in. And it shows you how she's able to swim into this upward mobility to the highest of positions. And she's very intelligent. And my favorite is she's described as pious and mutadayyina or Dina. And all these characteristics serve her very well later on as she rises through the ranks and ultimately ends up becoming the Sultana. So in the 1230s, late 1230s, when Al-Kamil dies, civil war breaks out. And initially she is and again, this isn't something documented in a Martin Ling's biography. We're just kind of piecing together and making inferences. But she's likely with Saleh in Mesopotamia and Iraq. And what happens is Al-Kamil divides up his empire. He goes, I'm going to give the Iraq and the northern part to Saleh, and Egypt is going to go to Al-Adil, okay? But Adil is a very weak ruler, very unpopular, and almost immediately he's not having a very fun time with his emirs and all the intrigue happening in Cairo and Masr. But what happens is Saleh gets double-crossed by his vassal uncle, who's ruling in Damascus in cahoots with Al-Adil in Egypt. There's all this like intrigue and all this double-crossing happening. We could make a whole movie on this. It's like insane. But he ends up from Iraq. He comes all the way into Syria to deal with his uncle, who he feels is double-crossing him. And then he gets double-crossed by his army, and he ends up in jail in Qarak, which, by the way, if you've been to Qarak, if you are going to be imprisoned under house arrest somewhere, it's a pretty darn good place to do it. It's very cavernous. There's like a labyrinth. I took my kids there earlier this year, and they just loved it. They were like climbing walls, and it was like a true castle. Has an amazing vista of the entire world. It's like a cajillion miles in the sky. It is awesome. Highly recommend anyone to go reprise the imprisonment of Salah al-Ayyub. And Salahuddin Ayyubi, of course, that was one of the prized castles that him and his team conquered. Really cool place to go to. But he was imprisoned there for a couple of years while Al-Adil and the Emir actually of Qarak, his name was Nasr Yusuf, sorry, Nasr Dawood, okay, who's actually a Kurdish Emir. And this is a very important theme. You always have to look at anybody, any ruler or any mayor or any sultan in terms of their power base. So remember, the Ayyubids come initially from Iraq. Salahuddin himself was actually a Kurd, as the Ayyubids later are as well, from Tikrit. But the moment he is born, his uncle, likely Shirkuh, gets into a fight with some local Seljuk Emir, and they end up having to be exiled into Syria, which is where Imaduddin and Nuruddin's family picked them up, and the rest is history. But they always keep those ties to the Iraq Mesopotamian region, and they're Kurdish at the end of the day. So a lot of the Ayyubids, like As-Saleh, they derive a lot of their power from these Kurdish freeborn emirs, right? But this episode where he ends up in prison because his power base deserted him is leaving a indelible impact on how he looks at the world. And this is very critical to Islamic and Mamluk history, because later on, when he gets into Egypt and he takes control, he'll never forget the fact that he had no loyalty and he was sold out down the river by his own people. Okay, so this is really cool. So he's in prison for a couple of years by his cousin, but then he strikes a deal with Nasr Dawood where he says, Nasr actually has a claim to being the Emir of Damascus. This is like, there's so many cross-conflicting intrigues here. He strikes a deal with Nasr. He goes, if you let me out of Qarak, I will march on Cairo, where my feckless brother Al-Adil is controlling, and I'm going to put you back in Damascus. And so obviously Nasr is like, where do I sign? Gets out of prison. All this while, who is faithfully and dutifully with him every step of the way, including with him in prison likely, is Shajar al Durr. So he really draws a close connection with her. He's got, as a sultan or a Ayyubid prince, he's got access to a lot of ladies and, a lot of likely beautiful women. But this lady is a cut above. And I think because he's religious and he's very much in need of good strategic advice, I think they just become very close. And he just always considers her to be his really close friend, confidant, best friend. And I think she really helps him navigate all these things. So right after he's released, he marches straight down to Egypt. The emirs are ecstatic because nobody likes Al-Adil, and he is installed as a sultan. Nasser gets his way, and As-Saleh is able to generally unify or at least consolidate the Ayyubid rule. He's one of the few ones that's able to do it. And he's also the last one that's able to do it. So he's remembered pretty fondly as for lack of a better way of putting, a poor man's Salahuddin. So he's not Salah, he's Saleh, right? So he's kind of like a mini-me. He's like a mini-me.
Yeah.
But he is a lot of the good things that Salahuddin is. So 1240, he's now the Sultan in Egypt. And immediately he sets out trying to figure out how he can consolidate his power. Because remember, he's actually from Iraq. And his power base is entirely deserted. He's actually starting from scratch, building up his power base again in Egypt, because he knows he's one Amir looking at him the wrong way from being back in prison or worse. So that's where the impetus of the Bahri Mamluks comes from. He goes, all these Mamluks that are here, I had some up there in Iraq, and some of them deserted me. And as you know from the Mamluks episode, they all serve their own Amir, and every Amir is in it for themselves. They serve the Sultan, but there's a very complex interweaving web of loyalties. He wants Mamluks that are super soldiers only answering to him. So this is where, again, go to the Mamluks and the Baybars episode. I don't want to recount all of it. This is where he gets the idea, and he deals with some of his emirs like Bundukhdar, and he goes, I know you've been super training some amazing soldiers. I want you to roll yours into my Bahri Mamluk Corps. And he also has some private guards that he calls the Jamdariya. But these form his Mamluks. We'll just call them, for ease of reference, the Bahri Mamluks, the new guard. Then you've got the old guard of Mamluks, what I always called it, the Mu'azzis or the Qala'is, that are more based in the citadel, of which Qutuz is a member. And of course, is Al-Mu'azzi Aybak, who's basically their Don. But these guys are a different faction. Although they are Mamluks in the broader sense, they're not loyal necessarily to Saleh and Shajar al Durr. A lot of the things that they do in common later on are usually based on an alignment of convenience and interest. So you have to look at Qutuz and Aybak as their own team, and then Faris ad-Din Aqtai, the great teacher of Baybars and Babes, as we call them, as being the Bahris on the one side. And these people grow up directly loyal to Saleh and Shajar al Durr. They're in the family, in the house, they're very connected to them. And that is the Saleh and the Shajar al Durr's base of power. It's these Kurdish emirs like Nasser and Fakhruddin, who is the general of the Ayyubid army. And you've got these Bahadis led by Aqtai and Baybars. And this set of power dynamics shapes everything that happens later on, okay? So throughout the 1240s, Saleh does a great job ruling Egypt, consolidating. As we know from some of the other episodes, in the mid-1240s, King Louis IX, great king, pious man from France, almost dies as a young man. On his deathbed, he makes a plea to God, if you get me out of this, I will wage another crusade. God has a plan for everyone, including tribulating us with the dua of a King Louis. He's like, I can work with this. I can test these guys.
Let's go.
Absolutely. So King Louis comes in. There's a few skirmishes in the mid-1240s where Baybars and Aqtai are able to really distinguish themselves and really prove that they are the defenders of the realm. And they continue to get closer and more respected in the Ayyubid and especially the Salahiyya circles. Okay. Late 1240s, 1249, let's say the summertime, Louis now is starting to get into full-out Crusader mode. He comes in and he lands at Damietta al-Damiyat, which is in the northern part of Egypt. As we talked about before, there's always these usual landing spots for Crusaders. Mm-hmm. With Egypt, it's Damietta, it's on the north. In Syria and Sham, it's usually Antioch or Cyprus and Malta. There's always these different landing points depending on what you want to plunder today or tomorrow for the Crusaders.
Somehow they got their favorite spots.
They always got their favorite spots, as we all do.
Yeah.
We got our favorite shower room spots. We got our favorite landing spots.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
So by this point, Saleh is actually very ill. He comes down with tuberculosis or some sort of pulmonary issue that he soon realizes he's not long for life. By summer of 1249, he's not actually able to do much in the form of a defense. So he knows that the Crusaders are landing. He's all the way down in Cairo, but he's not even able to make it all the way up to the northern coast to defend the realm. And this is a big problem. And actually, I should probably take a step back. and talk about some of the things that are happening in Shajar al Durr's life during this time, okay? Before we get to even the Crusades. So she's rising up the ranks. Saleh trusts her greatly. She's with him in Qarak. She is released with him, likely. She comes down to Egypt. In Egypt, the good times roll. Almost immediately, she has a son with him, Al-Khalil, and Khalil is the heir apparent, so that immediately elevates her status.
Of course.
And she's now proudly calling herself Walidat Khalil. She's signing papers as Walidat Khalil. She's proud to be an Ayyubid Sultan mother, okay? That's a big deal for her, especially considering where she came from.
Yeah, she's the top now. She's like the top woman in Egypt.
She's the top. And around that time or sometime after that, Saleh is like, this lady is my queen. I'm going to marry her, which is unheard of. So she goes from concubine to a nobody to being in prison at Qarak to serving dutifully with her man. And I think a big part of his success, because she's very strategic, she's very intelligent.
As we'll find out.
Saleh needs some geniuses in his midst, and it all works together. This is perfect marriage. He marries her. Now she becomes a princess, a queen. She's a sultana, right? In so many ways. But unfortunately, Khalil dies, so she doesn't. This actually ends up having an impact long term because she doesn't have an Ayyubid prince. She loses that base of power because right now her base of power and influence is Saleh, obviously her husband, who's a sultan. Her son Khalil, she can be the queen mother, as we saw so many Ottoman queen mothers.
Absolutely, that's
right?
A real position.
That's a real position of power, right?
Absolutely.
And that actually works against her, as I'm going to get into later on in terms of her demise. And then she has the Bahariyas that she's very close with, who serve her husband and her and are very close. So all this is happening. Upward mobility is off the charts for this lady. And I want to emphasize again, she's always doing good work. She's known for dealing with things to help the plight of the poor. She is very supportive of the Qurra and Tahfidh al-Quran, people reciting Quran. She's building masajid. She is a great, very effective queen, doing all the things that you would want a queen to do. So this reputation that she's an evil person, this and that, I don't know where it comes from. This lady rose up the ranks. Did she have sharp elbows? Of course. What king in Islamic history doesn't have sharp elbows? Because as we talked about in other episodes, you don't have the divine right of kings in Islam. You're only as good as the last thing that you did for the people and the last instance where you show that you're implementing the Sharia and doing good. Otherwise, there's a lot of long knives and you're not long for this world.
Yeah, it's so hard. You know what I mean? It's so hard. Like, it's always been that situation where I've always felt like, how hard can it actually be to lead people in an entire nation, have them happy with you, and then die and hope they remember you in a positive way? Because you could have been a great king, but in your end, you were so, and therefore when history remembers you, it doesn't remember you as glamorous as you would have hoped for.
But a lot of times I can see why it doesn't remember you glamorously. I honestly, for the life of me, let's go talk to Ammo after this.
Yeah, sure.
I can't understand why that is the case with this lady. I don't think there's any other person in history who's been dealt a worse raw deal and a bad rep for inexplicable reasons than this lady, to be very honest. Other ones you can understand. We can talk about Babes. Why is he underreported? Because people are uncomfortable about what happened with Q. Why is Q lionized? Because he didn't last very long and he's always the lost cause. Oh, the one that got away, or the one that could have done so many amazing things. I actually can't understand with this lady why she isn't more heralded. But let's get back to the Crusades. So 1249, Saleh is gravely ill. He can't even muster enough energy to go up and challenge the Crusader landing at Damialt. And so because they land so easily, Louis and his brother Robert Artois, or let's try and flex our French today, Robert of Artois. I'm sure a lot of my Assyrian and Moroccan friends were laughing their guts off at me, like, what the hell was that for a guy born and raised in Canada? You're despicable, right?
Not
but
bad.
I'm doing the best I can, right? Hey, doing the best I can.
Welcome to Canada, man. It's good.
So they land and they immediately get very aggressive. They're thinking, if it was so easy to land, we'll just go straight to Cairo. And by the way, Sheikh Omar Suleiman made a great point on this when he talked about how the later Crusades were no longer even about Jerusalem. They're starting to come straight for Cairo to plunder. They have no reason to, if Cairo is the power base and the strongest point of entry, why wouldn't you go straight up to Jerusalem, where the Ayyubids are a little fractionized, and it's clear that Saleh is not as strong in Quds as he is in Cairo. So you're better off just going straight to Jerusalem.
Right.
So this kind of shows that they're just going to plunder wherever they can get the shiniest.
The minute they found out that there was wealth down there, they got real excited.
Suddenly, Jerusalem isn't so shiny anymore.
That's right.
Beit al-Maqdis. We'll take it whether there's
Gold or no gold.
No gold, because it means something special to us for reasons that have nothing to do with wealth. But the Crusaders, they're in it for other things, right? Obviously not a reflection on all Christians, but Crusaders, I'm not a fan of, as you can probably tell from a few of the episodes that we've done.
Very normal, I would say.
Yeah. So they get really emboldened, even though a lot of the generals are telling Louis and Robert, guys, let's consolidate the coast and slowly move downwards. They're like, no, we have them right where we want them. So they march immediately downwards towards the Nile, and they are finally met halfway from Cairo to Damiat by a small strand of the Nile outside of a city called Al-Mansura. So Mansura, here you've got a strand of the Nile. Well, I'll try and do it from your perspective. Nile, you've got the walled city of Al-Mansura, and then Saleh is able to make it up here from Cairo, and he sets up an encampment on the southern bank of the river, okay? And the Crusaders are on the northern bank. This is around November of 1249, okay? They finally, Crusaders make it far south without much resistance, and they see that, okay, finally the Ayyubids are going to challenge us. What they don't know is in November of 1249, Saleh dies in the camp.
This is the biggest part.
This is the biggest story. And this puts into train the crazy sequence of events that leads to the Sultana situation and the Mamluk, okay? So knowing that Saleh was sick, and I think people understood that something's not right, we're not seeing our king anymore or our Sultan as much, and something's not right. Shajar al Durr, who's his closest confidant, and I think he's given a lot of authority to, she realized very quickly, this is a disaster scenario. We literally had the Crusaders, and this is one of the biggest crusades that we've seen in some time, and they outnumber us. I think it's 25,000, 30,000. We've got 15, 20. We're reeling. This is a very strong crusade under a great king. King Louis is a very respected, good man, very competent. So this is not a joke.
And he actually feels that he is actually being blessed by God for it. Like, this is actually like
exactly
retribution. This is everything.
No doubt, no doubt. So she conceals the fact that he's died somehow. Her Fakhruddin, who is one of the emirs from Mesopotamia, the Kurdish emir that she trusts, he's the commander-in-chief of the Ayyubid army. He's the only one that knows, like I believe Babes and Aqtai know, and they basically all bury him under the cover of darkness. And there's reports that she has food being brought in for the ailing sultan. She does a great job. This is November of 1249. And for a couple of months, the Crusaders don't know that he's died, and nobody knows that Saleh has died, and so they haven't attacked yet. But by early February, the Crusaders are like, something's not right here, and they haven't done anything. They haven't even come out to meet. There's something not right. Let's just mount a surprise attack. So what Louis and Robert order is the elite knighthood and cavalry of the Crusaders, the brain trust of their army, mounts a surprise crossing of the river, and they attack the camp early, let's say February 11, February 12, 1250, okay? Fakhruddin, who is the face of the franchise now and everybody's seeing, is poor guy taking a bath when he hears commotion. He comes out without his armor, and like a horror movie, he's knocked off almost instantly. So there is pandemonium in the camp. If you're an average Mamluk or a soldier, I haven't seen my Sultan in 4 months. The guy that has been calling all the shots for him just got knocked off within seconds of the battle. This is not looking good. Let's start making a deal with the other side. It's really bad, okay? And I know this isn't a episode about Baybars. This is about Shajar al Durr, but you
can't ignore Babes in this story.
Exactly, because at an early stage, she basically gave the carte blanche. She goes, I trust you guys. Fakhruddin, you're the guy. Trust these Mamluk, these Bahris, Aqtai, and Baybars. They have carte blanche to do whatever to defend the realm because Saleh is dead. We have no idea. We need to get out of this situation. It's a surprise attack. Pandemonium in the camp. Fakhr falls early on. There is palpable fear, and nobody knows what's going to happen. It's in that situation, I want to emphasize to people, it's one thing to lay a trap in a perfect situation where it's premeditated and I lure you into something. It's another to improvise on the fly and figure out a trap.
In war.
So Babes is literally in the camp, and he's credited with the strategy. So we don't know who talks about what or who walkie-talkie Shajar. We don't know what happened. All we know is that Babes gets credit for what happens next. So Babes is in the camp. He sees the world going to hell. He sees the strongest cavalry maybe in the world crossing over, wiping the encampment. The walled city of Mansura is just to the west. Everybody's panicking like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Babes goes, this is freaking awesome. I got these suckers right where I want them. I don't know what the hell he was thinking, pardon my language. He lays the trap in that situation. I want to emphasize to people, this is hell breaking loose. And this man goes, oh, this is awesome. I got him exactly where I want him.
Perfect setup. This is what I've been dreaming.
He's like, this is exactly what I've always wanted. Mm-hmm. And everybody's probably looking at him like, what the hell are you talking about? We're going to die. This is it. Babes goes, trust me. He lures everybody into the old walled city. And I don't believe there's any civilians. It's mostly all just Mamluks and super soldiers hiding in the streets. And then they make it seem like everybody's walled into the city. And then he somehow gets the Crusaders to believe that somebody flung open the gates to surrender. The Crusaders all go in, including Robert. They go in. And when they go into this walled city, if you've been to an old walled city anywhere, this is not the ideal haven for cavalry. You've got no space to move. You might as well get off your horse. And when you get off your horse, you're now hand-to-hand combat against infantry. You're toast.
Yeah, because you're not even equipped for that battle.
All the knights are wiped out. Just like you talk about turning the tide of a battle. We've lost Egypt 12 seconds ago. Babes has this ridiculous idea. I don't know how he got people to even believe in the idea. Yeah. They're going to go for it. Because he knows that they're getting really cocky and aggressive. They crossed the river. They killed our guy. They think they have us. They're going to follow us into that death trap. They're going to take their horses into an old city, which is actually a horrible idea, but they're going to do it because they're so damn arrogant.
Yeah, that's the trick.
This is the genius of Baybars. You got to appreciate these situations, right? And Shajar al Durr deserves credit because people always talk about, is it Brady or Belichick? Well, who drafted Brady? Who took a chance on him when nobody else did? This is a slave. Same idea. Right? Same idea. You can say what you want, but she gave the Bahris.
And how different would it be if she actually said, you know what, let's just give up. I'm going to marry Robert or one of these guys.
Exactly.
That everything could have been different because you have to remember now this is quote unquote the queen.
Exactly.
So if she just let the world know, hey, my husband's dead and I'm now the queen, the whole world's different.
But why doesn't she make that decision? Because she's mutadayina. She's pious. She cares about her religion. She cares about her people. She's not going to do that. I'm not selling out my people. I'd rather die here, figure out a way to make this happen.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
The rest is history. The Crusaders, their key parts are decimated. Robert is killed. Louis is devastated. His brother is killed, the person he trusts the most, whose bad advice he basically took to come all the way south. It was the two brothers kind of like echo chambering each other into this horrible idea.
Gotta watch out for that echo chamber sometimes.
Exactly. So Louis now is crossing back over the river and running for his life to the north. This is February of 2050. In the meantime, there actually is a successor to Saleh. His name is Turan Shah. So Shajar al Durr has actually reached out to him saying, can you come south? And she tells him actually in November. It takes him a few months to get there. He gets there after the Battle of Mansura. So you think of the situation. You get this prince who shows up, who's supposed to be your leader. He's taken 4 months to get there. We were buying time for him to get there. He took a sweet time. I'm sure realistically it wasn't that easy for him to come. But from the perspective of the Mamluks, like, where have you been?
We had a whole war happen.
We saved the world and you weren't even there.
Yeah.
And now he shows up and he's very arrogant. And he's like, oh, you guys are my dad's former slaves. Who the hell are you? I'm going to bring my Diyar Bakr loyal guys. I'm going to start replacing you. And you guys aren't long for this life. He's just saying all these ridiculous things. And he's not even a guy that carries respect from anybody. Nobody even knows who he was. I believe when he was in Mesopotamia, I don't think he was even in a ruler position. Like, he's not a guy with a lot of street cred.
I think it's very important to single out, you are now talking to babes and these giant,
yeah, they saved
giant Mamluk soldiers.
Yeah, yeah.
And you are this, let's call it, because we want people to imagine this. You are talking to literally this spoiled brat kid that is now thinks he's the prince.
Exactly.
And he's probably never held a sword in his life. Like,
And
let's really put it in perspective here. And now you're talking to warriors that just defeated the scariest people and to Muslims at that
and they are rock stars to the army. So the army's like, right? And then this guy shows up and he's like, these guys are idiots.
Yeah.
These guys are my dad's slaves. And they're like, sorry, who are you?
Yeah.
Right? Again, because Islam,
4 months later.
We don't have the divine right of king. So people are like looking at Turan Shah, who's this little pipsqueak? What's he all about? And now he's being very irreverent to the guys who saved the day. So it's planting the seed like, hey, shouldn't these guys be in power? Like, who's this guy? Just because his daddy was a king? Like, I don't care about him. That's where this mentality is coming from. This is why Islam always had tensions with transitions, because nobody has an inherent right to rule. It's only insofar as you are good in the job. So this man is doing all these ridiculous things, and the straw that breaks the camel's back is he actually writes a letter to Shajar al Durr saying, please give me back all my father's belongings and anything that you have that belongs to the crown. So Farisuddin Aqtai, who's the commander of the Bahris and Babes, are reportedly incensed by this. Who the heck does this man think he is? They're very loyal to her, but they're also incensed at the idea that, why is this guy trying to call all the shots? He wasn't even here when we needed him. Now he thinks he just has the right to rule. And we don't answer to this guy. We answer to his dad. According to his own testimony, we're his dad's slaves, so we ain't his slaves.
That's right.
That's how they're looking at it. So sometime around April, okay, the Bahris, technically under the command of Turan Shah, but I don't think he doesn't get credit in the eyes of the people and not in history for anything he's done. So I think it's more the Bahris that cut off Louis on his retreat to get back to Damiat. They catch him somewhere between Al-Mansura and Damiat. He's cut off at what's called Faris Kur, okay? And again, the Bahris just decimate them. It's now time to kick butt and take names, okay? So in the eyes of the people, everybody's seeing this as being to the credit of Shajar al Durr, because she's been marshaling these Bahris. They're loyal to her. She saved us the first time with a whole sleight of hand and nobody knowing that her husband was dead. And now they actually capture Louis the ninth.
This is
and she's negotiating with him severe reparations and payback. And it's very embarrassing to him. So the Muslims were like, Shajar al Durr, just own this guy. They sent the crusade, and now their king is captured and he's striking a deal begging her for mercy. It's on that level,
right? and it's so wild to imagine the scenario, because you have this girl, and you know what? Let's look at it from the European lens, because I think the European lens is even more dramatic. So you wake up one day, you have this dream that you're gonna go and conquer the world.
Yeah,
right. This is our boy Louis.
Yeah,
and then Louis like, hey guys, we're gonna just scorch earth on Egypt. We're gonna take all their treasures. Let's just go to town on them, and then later on we'll go for Jerusalem. But let's get the gold. Let's get the goods.
Yeah,
suit up. They go, they suit up. Oh, look, this land is empty. This is going to be the easiest fight of our lives. Brother dies, everyone's dead, right?
Yeah.
And they try and escape, right? Ultimately, that's what they're doing. They're trying to escape with some dignity, you know what I mean? And no. Now this slave nation, led by this slave girl, captures you.
Yeah.
Negotiates with you. Basically puts you in your place. And the funniest thing here is now the rest of Europe must be just falling apart, because the entire hierarchy that they've come to love is just upside down.
Yep.
Right? They can't tell left from right anymore. So our prince, imagine, our prince is being beat up by a bunch of slaves, and now there's this woman.
Let's just not beat up, by the way. He was treated very nicely.
No, I know about his army, right?
Yeah.
Beat up, killed, and now this woman, forget about that she's a queen, forget about she's even a slave, just calling her a woman. This woman now is trying to negotiate with us. Wait a minute, this woman's a slave? Like, it just lower and lower and lower. So the Europeans, I can only imagine
how awesome it must have been.
Right? What that feeling must have been. And then you have the Egyptians and the Muslims on that side. this has got to be an all-time high.
Yeah, exactly.
This is an all-time high.
And so when we talk about a few years later in 1260, Ain Jalut and Qutuz is the hero. Like, why do we forget about this moment? This is huge, right? Ain Jalut wouldn't have had to have happened if we got wiped out here, right? Like there's so many different ways that you have to look at history, and in history we tend to over-aggrandize certain things and under-report some things, but you've got to give this entire moment of the Seventh Crusade and Shajar al Durr as
It's got to be given.
You got to give it its credit.
Mm-hmm.
So then, right after that, the Bahris have had it with Turan Shah. So apparently, one of the Bahris, we don't know who it is. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Babes was somehow connected to this. And by the way, by this point, Qutuz and Aybek are on board. They're like, this dude needs to go. Okay, and a bit of background that we've talked about in other episodes about Q and Aybek is they're actually Khwarizmi princes from back home. So they've got a different flair to them. They're going to look princely. They're going to be very regal. They're going to have a different level of class than Babes, who's a scrappy little soldier in Akhtai. These guys are just guys that you don't want to mess with, guys that are super intelligent. They've gotten the best of training under Saleh. They're probably more knowledgeable. They're ulama and shuyukh. But they don't look like princes, Khwarizmi princes like Q and Aybek. So that kind of shapes things.
Sure.
They're almost
Absolutely.
they're almost polar opposites in some ways, right?
The cool guys.
Yeah, exactly. The princes.
That's right.
So in this setting where war is happening and you're being attacked, there's a tendency for people to favor the warrior class, the Bahris. But when it's peacetime, you get the pretty boys. You're going to get Q and you're going to get Aybek, al-Turkmani, as Ibn Kathir calls them, to sort of lead the way. It's very interesting how circumstances lead to changes in history, okay? At this point, though, everybody's on board. All the Mamluks are like, Turan Shah needs to go. Somebody goes and cuts his hand. He gets really ticked off. Some reports later on, they may be Mamluk reports that are not flattering towards Turan Shah, but he's drunk. In a drunken stupor, he starts cursing the Mamluks. They cut his hand. He's like, I'm going to kill every last one of these Mamluks. And then word gets around to the other guys, probably Q and Babes, whoever wasn't there the first time, that Turan Shah, somebody tried killing him. He didn't die. As they say, what was that saying in that movie, Born Identity? If you want to kill me, you better kill me dead. Right?
Right.
That's Turan Shah at this moment. So they surround him and they start attacking him. He gets hit by an arrow. He runs to the water. He goes into a tower. They light the tower on fire. He comes down. And then I think the most credible report is that Babes puts him under. She goes and kills him. And he's, by this point, I just want to point out what a coward this man was. He's reported to have begged for his life. Right. Al-Aman, Al-Aman, I'm okay. You guys can rule. I don't need to rule. I don't even know who had this idea of me being the king. You guys take it. It's all good. They're like, forget this guy.
Well, you have to keep in mind, the minute the guy runs his mouth,
Yep.
all these soldiers, I think you have it coming. Like,
No, and his track record the last couple of months, right?
yeah, like it's so
Can't
clear.
trust it, yeah.
Like in those days,
Yeah.
you know, the guy that's strong and has a sword,
Yep.
that's not the guy you bully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can bully the shorter guy, but you got to
And
be
I-
really into yourself.
And I want to point out something very important here that we keep harping upon here. In the European lens, this is unthinkable. How are slaves or the Praetorian Guard killing the Sultan? This is a regicide. In Islam, there's no concept of regicide. You see what I mean? You don't have a divine right to rule. You know, in Shakespeare, when King Duncan is killed, that's regicide. This man has a divine right to rule. How dare you go and kill him? Kingslayer, as they say in Game of Thrones. We don't have that concept in Islam. Did you have the legitimacy of the ulama? Did the ulama recite your name at the khutbah? Did you get their blessing? This is how Islam appoints the ruler. Are you getting the endorsement of the ulama and the people to rule by the law? If not, there's no regicide. You're a nobody. You're dead. And Turan Shah is a nobody, and he is dead. Okay, so this is not regicide. I want to be very clear. We've got a very different perspective on these things.
That's good.
So if you're going to use a Eurocentric lens to paint Babes and Q as a certain way, they're actually not doing anything that is against Islamic political convention. If anything, it was kill or be killed, because he just said, I'm going to kill all these last guys. You're my dad's slaves. I'm going to get rid of you. And they've been reading the writing on the wall where he's been replacing them in high positions with his own people that are loyal, Diyarbakars, and they were the saviors of the day. So anyways, we're putting too big a point on Turan Shah. This isn't a show on him. This is about Shajar al Durr, but I do want to have these conversations. So in about May of 1250, the Bahris are now in power, and the Mamluks, and they look around and they go, who is the Sultan now? We have no idea who is the ruler. It should be Shajar al Durr. That tells you what the people at the time thought about who had saved the day. Okay, we can say what we want in 2026. She was an evil woman, this and that. I'm telling you what people who were there at the time, who survived this literally crusade and catastrophe and came out on the other end, who they thought was the hero. Okay, so her name is recited in khutbahs. The ulama back her up. She starts getting her own coinage. She is the Sultana from May until late 1250. She is that person now. It's actually incredible.
You know, it's actually interesting because she can actually play that role, technically speaking, because you still have the quote-unquote Abbasids in Iraq twiddling their thumbs.
Don't get me started. That's where I was going next, and that's where the story kind of unfurls and takes a dark turn.
Yeah.
Right? But she's minting coins, and she's actually being deferential. She's saying, I am the helper of the Sultana under the authority of the Abbasids. She's doing all the right things. But of course, we've got a really pansy, weak-ass man, pardon my language, in Baghdad named Al-Mustasim.
Yes, that's not your friend? I thought you were...
Al-Mustasim is not my friend. He's not our friend.
Check out the Abbasid episode. Mujir lets you know.
Al-Mustasim has basically, at this point, when the Mongols are starting to really wreak havoc on Muslim lands, he somehow disbanded his army, and he blames it on Ibn al-Alqam, his Grand Vizier. I don't care. You wear the decision. If you are going to make all these grandiose statements, and he certainly does in the case of Shajar al Durr, when he finds out, just to finish that point, he has to wear the destruction of Baghdad, absolutely. Okay, but before that, that was in 1258. In 1250, he puts out this really cute but pathetic statement when he finds out that a sultana, a woman, is ruling Egypt. He says, a woman cannot rule over Egypt. This is unthinkable. If you need men to rule over Egypt, let us know. We will send some. In hindsight, maybe we should have been sending some help over. The Egyptians should have been sending some help over to him, because
should have been
sending the women over in power in Baghdad, right?
That's right, exactly.
And part of the reason why the Mongols were so ticked at him is they're like, what kind of man are you? You're like living palaces of gold, all this luxury, and you couldn't even pay for an army to defend against us. That to them was like, well, you're subhuman. You don't deserve our respect. We're going to walk over you with our horses.
That's a great point.
Right? They respond to strength, not like a pansy who's like, oh, please, just let me keep Baghdad. I have all this gold. They're like, who are you?
Yeah.
These are different types of people. So because of that, there's some backlash. And Shajar al Durr is like, okay, I can't rule in my own name, so I need to find a king or a puppet to rule through. So she taps Muneeruddin Aibak. This is where Aibak comes in, because he looks the part, right?
Princely guy.
He's a princely guy. He's from regal heritage, and Q is his number 2. So now the conch slides away from the Bahri Mamluks over to the general Mamluks, or I'll call them the Qala'i Mamluks, who were trained and they live in the Qala'a of Cairo. So that's a bit of a hit.
There's a big move now. This is a big move. This is where it gets real dicey.
Because remember Shajar al Durr's power base. The Bahris, the Ayyubids, who are not really served well by the Qala'is, who are their own princes and they kind of serve their own agenda. And Aibak is very ambitious. So they're kind of Aibaki in some ways. Mu'izzi they're called, right? So this is a big blow to Shajar al Durr's power. But she's still the Sultana. She still has the Bahris. So she's ruling through Aibak as a puppet. And she continues to do a lot of great things. Masajids are built, a lot of sponsorship of religious scholarship and people memorizing the Quran, a lot of anti-poverty programs that she's doing. She's building all kinds of things, coinage. It's actually a very, very unique time in history, and she does some really good things. Again, all goes to speak to why I don't understand why this woman gets a bum rap.
It's a little bit later. It's a little bit later.
Yeah. So Aibak himself, a Turkmani, as Ibn Kathir calls him. I don't think he was actually Turkmen. He might have been, but he was actually Khwarizmi, but whatever, okay? Aibak is also not a stupid dude, okay? So Aibak realizes, listen, I want the whole thing to myself. There's this lady here whose power base is the Bahris, and she was married to the former Ayyubid, but Ayyubids aren't even in power anymore. She's been ruling. This is like a new Mamluk era. So how can I sideline this woman? So for the first thing he does is he knows that her power base is Aqtai and the Bahadis. So he calls Aqtai under the auspices of consultation to the Qal'a. Aqtai, in hindsight, was pretty naive. He goes in without his boy, so Babes and everybody are waiting at the bottom of the Qal'a outside, and they ambush him in the Qal'a and they chop off his head. So Aqtai is knocked off. And then they toss his head into the field in front of the Qal'a, right at Babes' feet. So most of the Bahadi brain trust looks up and they go, this is not a good look. Things are turning for the worse really quick. They actually run off, okay? And they go to settle with Nasser Yusuf in Halab or in Damascus in the north, in Syria, but they're away from Cairo now. So there are some Bahadis that stay back, and you have the Jamdadis, but this is a huge blow to Shajar al Durr, right? After this, her days are numbered in some ways, unless those guys come back, and you can see history is floating away from her, unfortunately.
What they knew would happen begins to happen, right? That's the fact. She always knew she needed her own defense, right? Her and Salah knew they needed their own defense.
Yeah.
They always knew they had to have their own people. They always knew they couldn't trust the other guys. And now you have the perfect storm.
And it's fate, too, because if Khalil had lived, she could have said, this is the next Ayyubid ruler. I'm the mother. And it would have been great. But he didn't make it. It was the will of God. It just wasn't meant to be. So she starts to lose more and more power. So about a year or two later, a couple years, let's say 1257, Aybak gets this idea. He goes, this is my time to go in for the kill now. I'm going to go marry an Ayyubid princess and take the entire conch away from Shajar al Durr. Okay. We're going to have Ayyubid babies. It's going to be awesome. And then it's just going to be the Aybaki dynasty or the Mamluki dynasty. And Shajar al Durr is entirely sidelined. And at this point, she makes her first grave miscalculation. The way I see it is because she really has no moves left in the quiver, in the toolkit. She's probably not of birthable age anymore. Aybak probably gave it a couple of years to see if they could have a baby. That's probably the easy way out. She can't have a baby because I think she was born in the 1210, so she's probably into her 40s or 50s by 1257. Probably can't have a baby. Saleh is dead. Khalil is dead. Babes and Aqtai's gone. Babes is in Damascus. She's really sidelined now. And a lot of people are starting to wonder, like, who is this lady? Why is she even here? It's really an unfortunate situation for her. So this really is a master stroke, if you're thinking about it from Aybak's perspective, to sideline her.
It's a very natural thing to do, I would say, in this position, right? Like, you're the king, and you're like, why does this woman get any credit when I could just have it all?
Exactly.
Right? Guys, we are constantly humanizing people. There is no such thing of someone not being human. So these are all human beings, and the desire for power, the desire for greed, that's a real thing.
In a context where nobody has the conch inherently. You see what I mean?
That's right.
These are people that are in a situation where there's a power grab. There's no divine rule that says it has to belong with somebody. So we're all just going to grab for it and see who has the right to rule. And Shajar al Durr is a religious person. She wants her good social Islamic programs of feeding the poor and the Quran to happen in her image. She wants to be the one to call those shots. Aybak wants to be the one to call it his way, right? So, although I don't think she's actually admitted to this, but it's very likely that she hatches a plan.
Well, she's credited for sure.
Right?
She's credited
for killing Aybak. So Aybak, she calls him into the Khala one day under the auspices of reconciliation because the marriage ain't going so bright, as you can probably imagine. Aybak shows up for a little reconciliatory night, conjugal visit, whatever. And in the bath, he gets intercepted and killed probably by some of the handmaidens. So nobody can lay the blame directly on one person or the other, but he's killed. Obviously, nobody is less happy than Q and the other the Qala'i Mamluks, but the Bahri regiment that is still there and the Jamdaris, she has enough of a power base where she isn't immediately killed because nobody buys her story. They think she put a hit out on Aybak. She's already weakened, so she isn't the Sultana per se as much anymore, but they allow her safe passage, so she's imprisoned in, I believe it's called the Red Tower in the Qala. So she's imprisoned. Over the next few months, though, she still has some legitimacy to rule. She still has some power base. So she's trying to find the next Aybak. Who can marry me and fix this problem? She's trying to give the conch, give the throne to somebody. But for whatever reason, no Mamluk Amir wants to take it on. They just think it's political suicide. Nobody wants to do it. So finally, Q and the Muezzis, they land on the son of Aybek to take over, okay, to be the regent. And Q is the regent, and he will rule through the puppet that is Aybek's son, okay? But the bigger impact on Shajar al Durr is now the son of Aybek is in power, which makes his mother what? The queen mother, the Sultana.
Right.
So now the Sultana, who was always faithful and loyal to Aybek, his first wife, now she wants revenge. So Shajar al Durr is entirely exposed. So this was a miscalculation. Without having air cover, you call a hit out on somebody as powerful as Aybek.
There's no way you're...
Only bad things are going to happen. So I can only surmise that for such an intelligent lady, she felt that she had no more arrows in the quiver. She had no more moves on the chessboard, and this was a last-ditch effort to see what she could do, and she was resigned to her fate. That's how I see it, okay? So she is very, in the most dehumanizing and embarrassingly way possible. She's beaten to death, reportedly with, they call it cogs, I guess, wooden sandals of the handmaidens of Aybek and his wife. And then she is actually, apparently by some reports, stripped naked and thrown off the tower. This is like for a religious woman of noble standing. This is actually below the belt, right? And her body is left there for some time until some people collect her and bury her. Now in Cairo, she has a very nice mausoleum. Alhamdulillah, she does have some respect, but they really did her dirty. And this woman was the woman that had her killed, the Sultana, or the mother, the queen mother, was pretty vindictive, and she got her revenge. Okay. And
She was
by the way, if you must know, her kunya is what? Ali.
No.
So it is held by a lot of Egyptians that
She's
the
the
famous
third-
bird Ali was made in commemoration of Shajar al Durr being knocked off.
No way.
Yeah.
That's how that goes together?
That's what a lot of people believe, yeah.
Yeah. You're
Ali.
right.
Yeah.
You're right. That is the Ali.
So, but Shajar al Durr's legacy doesn't end there. Because she's entirely destabilized and thrown open the gates of power to the highest bidder and to the Mamluks, what ends up happening is, remember in the 1250s, the Crusades are happening and then the Mongols are coming. So in 1258, when the Baghdadis get erased and the Abbasis there and the Khilafah momentarily ends until Bey brings it back, as you'll know from our episode in 1260, 1261, Q takes a look around and he goes, I don't think this kid can defend us anymore, so I'm going to depose him and just make myself the Sultan. So all of these events and the chain that leads up to them are a byproduct of Shajar al Durr saving the day and putting all this into train that gives rise to the Mamluk and allows Q to be the king outright, and for Babes after him and all the other Mamluk, Barakuk, and all the other great ones that came after to do their thing. So for that reason, she is actually the mother, al-Mamalik. She is the founder of the Mamluk dynasty. Even though she actually isn't even maybe Turkic, she's Armenian, but she's the mother of that dynasty. And what happens next? Q, Ain Jalut, you have to give her some credit for that, because she was the one that enabled Q to even be in that position in the first place, right? So it's unfortunate that the story of Shajar al Durr ends in that way. She did great things. She, for lack of a less modern way of putting it, she democratized the idea of power in the Muslim world and gave rise to these non-hegemonic, non-Arabic speaking, non-male or non-noble emirs from ruling the world. And the more dynamic the background, the more dynamic the people, usually the better the outcome, the better the ruler. And that's why the Mamluk and the Ottomans, to me, are the greatest dynasties that we've had. And that is a direct byproduct to me of the work and the cooking of Shajar al Durr.
Yeah, to me, it's amazing. That whole story is just so unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
if you ever wanted to make a good movie, you could pick any piece of that story, and it's a full blown movie.
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Rings, it would destroy it. You know what I mean? And it's just so many unpredictable things are constantly happening, and the we had that episode on the rings, right? The how did we?
The journey of the Khilafah,
Journey-
following the ring of
Follow
the Khilafah.
So even in this moment here, that journey of who's in charge and what's happening is just constantly moving left and right. Like you can't even see it.
Yeah.
So it was a very dynamic time. So no, it was amazing.
So based on what we're saying, again, I can't understand why she would be so maligned in history and people would say she's an evil person, controversial. I don't understand why she's controversial. Maybe because she killed a man who was supposed to be the king, but we know the history of Aybek. By the way, Aybek and Q, when it comes to all these different battles, Al-Mansura and Faris Kur, they were likely involved as Mamluks, but they're not really noted for any distinction with which they carried themselves in battle. It was all Q and, Babes and Aqtai and Shajar al Durr. So it's not even like they were the heroes before Ain Jalut. You know what I'm saying? So when she's killing Aybek isn't some hero that's been acquitting himself as a savior up until that point. He's just a very smart dude that has a regal background prior to slavery and being a Mamluk. So I don't understand.
A lot of the guys will hate me for saying this. I literally think it's just because she was a woman that killed a guy, and history
powerful.
And history has a tendency to be written from a male perspective, and therefore, what kind of a woman kills her husband? And I think that's all there is to it. There's no before, there's no after. It's literally that, and I think that kind of taints a lot of this era. You know,
Sure.
I really think there's. You know, we've had the discussion multiple times. Who's actually responsible for writing some of this history, right?
Sure.
Who's making this guy the hero and making this guy the villain? You know what I mean?
And maybe we ought to revisit, because let's go back to the facts and forget all the digestion and people having told us that this person is supposed to be a hero and this person is not supposed to be a hero, and distill from the facts forward who actually was the hero and who was the guy that's not on Team Mujir and Tarek historically, right? So, absolutely. And you know, the crazy thing is, what I would read about Shajar al Durr before, I actually assumed that her name was Shajar al Durr, which in Arabic means the tree of pain. I didn't even realize that her name actually was Shajar al Durr, which means the tree of pearls. That goes to show you how poor her reputation was in my mind. I actually didn't even realize until I looked at the Arabic. I'm like, oh, it's Shajar al Durr, not Durr.
Yeah, she got a bad rep.
Yeah, it was a bad rep.
Yeah, it was a bad rep.
But this is somebody that we wanted to really acquit in history and give people the facts as to who she was, what she stood for, and let the audience decide for themselves.
Let us know what you guys think. Let us know, was Shajar al Durr a hero or was she a villain? We think she was a hero, but we'll leave it up to the comment section. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and we will see you again next time on the Sands of Time podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell all your friends. Thank you.